Hello, and thank you for taking time to learn more about diabetes to enhance your ability to support a child with diabetes in the classroom. My name is Molly, and I've had type 1 diabetes since I was 4, and I'm in college now. It's not easy living with diabetes, but it shouldn't hold me back from accomplishing whatever I put my mind to. As an educator, you can have a positive impact by understanding diabetes and advocating for students with diabetes at school.
All school staff need some basic knowledge about diabetes. Diabetes is a chronic disease that affects adults and children. It cannot be cured, but it can be managed. Diabetes management is 24/7. You have to time and balance your meals, exercise, insulin, or other diabetes medications, and monitor blood glucose levels. Generally, food, stress, illness, or injury can cause blood glucose levels to go up. Insulin and other diabetes medications and physical activity make blood glucose levels go down. Glucose, also known as sugar, gives us energy. Glucose comes from food, especially carbohydrates. It's carried from the blood into cells in the body by a hormone called insulin. People with type 1 diabetes don't make insulin, while people with type 2 diabetes don't make enough insulin, and/or the insulin does not work properly. With type 1 diabetes, which used to be called juvenile diabetes, the immune system is involved. For some reason, the body destroys cells in the pancreas that make insulin. This type of diabetes is called type 1 diabetes, and it is when there is no insulin being produced by the pancreas. It's the most common type in children and adolescents. The treatment for type 1 diabetes is maintaining blood glucose levels with a balance of food, physical activity, and insulin. In type 2 diabetes, the pancreas doesn't produce enough insulin, or the insulin being produced isn't helping glucose enter the cells. Type 2 used to be referred to as adult-onset diabetes, but is increasingly being seen in younger people. Inactivity and being overweight are risk factors for type 2 diabetes, so exercise and good nutrition are important to prevent and treat type 2 diabetes in youth. Sometimes oral medications, insulin, or other injectable medications are also required. But whether it's type 1 or type 2 diabetes, the problem is the same. The body's own insulin isn't doing what it needs to do to move glucose from the blood to the cells where it can be used as energy. Not enough insulin means there's too much glucose in the blood because it isn't getting from the blood into the cells in the body. This is known as hyperglycemia or high blood glucose. Too much insulin can cause the opposite problem, hypoglycemia, or low blood glucose. Diabetes management is all about keeping blood glucose levels in a safe range. Not too high, but not too low either. This means having access to the necessary tools, like a blood glucose meter, insulin, food, glucagon, and sometimes other diabetes medications, and the school nurse and school diabetes team, which can include teachers, the principal, school secretary, cafeteria workers, and others, in order to maintain the proper balance. For the student's diabetes needs, a plan should be documented in the student's diabetes medical management plan, which includes physician's orders for the student in the school setting and other written care plans, and distributed to the school diabetes team. Diabetes can be serious in the short term if blood glucose levels become too low. Over the long term, high blood glucose levels can lead to complications like heart disease, stroke, blindness, amputation, and kidney failure. This is why good care is important. While diabetes is serious and does require 24/7 care, there's no need to be frightened or intimidated. The needs of the student can be safely and easily met when the school diabetes team has been properly trained and works together.
What you worry about most as a parent when you're not with your child is that they'll have a low blood sugar and be by themselves. And so probably the worst thing that a teacher could do, and used to happen to Molly sometimes, is that her blood sugar would get low and they would send her to my classroom by herself to get some juice, and I would worry that she would pass out on the way and not make it to me. And so I think it's really important for teachers to know not to ever send a child with diabetes, especially when they have a low blood sugar, by themselves anywhere.
Blood glucose monitoring is the cornerstone of diabetes care. Students should check their blood glucose before meals and snacks, and when they experience symptoms of either low or high blood glucose. However, not all students check before snacks. Blood glucose target range is individualized for each student and set out in the student's diabetes medical management plan. Many students can monitor their own blood glucose. Monitoring means using a lancet device to prick the skin at the fingertip, forearm, or other site to obtain a drop of blood. The drop goes onto a strip that is inserted into a meter. The meter shows the blood glucose level. Some students may need a nurse or other trained staff to do the checking, or help the student check. Blood glucose monitoring is perfectly safe. Test strips can be disposed of in the trash, and the school nurse should work with the family to plan the best strategy to dispose of the sharps. Some students may wear a continuous glucose monitor, referred to as CGMS. It continuously monitors blood glucose levels through fluid in the tissues. CGMS can be useful in detecting the onset of hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia, and monitors blood glucose patterns and trends. However, CGMS is not a substitute for fingerstick checks. Blood glucose levels should always be confirmed with a fingerstick check before any treatment or action is taken. Students need to be able to check their blood glucose anytime, anywhere, and to have equipment always available. It helps them to treat promptly, avoid the complications of diabetes, avoid unnecessary missed classroom time, and helps them become more independent.
Field trips are always an issue. When you send your child away and they're not around the school to have all the supplies that they're going to need, you need to know that the teacher is going to remember to take everything, whether it be sugar tabs or juice and something like that, especially if you're not going to be in an area where those are available. And so I really appreciated one year Molly had a teacher that would always check with me ahead of time and make sure that either we were going to have one of the parents on the field trip, or she would make sure she had everything in the bag that she would need. And that really put my mind at ease to know that someone was going to be with her and have everything she needed for that.
Insulin is a hormone that moves glucose from the blood into the other cells of the body where it is needed for energy. People with diabetes either don't produce any insulin, don't produce enough insulin, or their cells are resistant to insulin. As a result, all people with type 1 diabetes and many people with type 2 diabetes need to take insulin by injection or pump. There are different kinds of insulin that are used to treat diabetes. Some are designed to be fast-acting, others to have a long-lasting effect. Individuals differ in the type of insulin they use and the devices they use to administer insulin. There are a number of different regimens that are commonly prescribed. Fast-acting insulin starts to work to lower blood glucose levels within 10 to 15 minutes. Chances are, if you ever have to help a student take insulin, it will often be the fast-acting kind. Insulin is given to cover food and also when blood glucose is too high. Insulin in the school setting is given according to the order in the Student Diabetes Medical Management Plan. Students who take fast-acting insulin will need to take it before meals and snacks. Food drives blood glucose up. Insulin pushes it down. So many students take insulin about 10 minutes before eating, and some students may wait until after they eat. When insulin is taken will be spelled out in the Student's Diabetes Medical Management Plan. The fast-acting insulin starts to work just as the student has the meal or snack. It all balances out, as long as it's timed right and the dosage is given as spelled out in the Student's Diabetes Medical Management Plan. Also, the dosage can be easily calculated based upon the student's insulin to carbohydrate ratio and correction dosage. If the student takes the insulin but waits too long to eat, the blood glucose can drop too far down, and that can mean trouble. Students need different amounts of help. Some students may need to be reminded to take their insulin. Some students will be able to give themselves insulin. Others will need supervision, and younger or less experienced students will need a school nurse or other trained school staff member to administer insulin for them. School staff who help with insulin administration may also need to make sure that the student has something to eat within a very few minutes afterward. Students who are able to self-administer usually carry their insulin in a backpack or purse. Students who need help usually will keep their insulin in the clinic or other accessible location. Some students prefer to refrigerate insulin. Others store it at room temperature. Open vials should be discarded after 30 days. There are several insulin delivery devices that are covered in this video: syringe, insulin pen, and insulin pump. Insulin may only be given by injection and cannot be taken orally. The insulin pump is about the size of a pager. It's worn against the skin or on a waistband, depending on the type of pump, and delivers tiny amounts of insulin through the skin on a continuous basis. The student wears the pump all of the time. It's battery-powered and has a computer chip that regulates the delivery of insulin, and a bolus calculator that can measure the right amount of insulin to cover meals and snacks. But it still has to be programmed to deliver extra insulin at meals and whenever blood glucose is high. The student still has to check his or her blood glucose to make sure levels are within target range and that insulin is being properly delivered. Just push a button and insulin is automatically delivered through a small catheter inserted under the skin. As with any student with diabetes, you need to keep a watchful eye out for signs of trouble, such as hyperglycemia or high blood glucose.
Hang on a sec.
This may result from clogged tubing or a dislodged catheter, which will cause the pump to alarm. If insulin is not being properly delivered from the pump may have to be disconnected, and the student may need an injection by pen or syringe as specified in his or her diabetes medical management plan. The greatest immediate danger to students with diabetes is hypoglycemia. That's low blood glucose. Remember how it sounds: hypo, low. The other thing you need to remember is that many times hypoglycemia cannot always be prevented. Be alert for a range of possible signs that something's wrong. Different students can have different symptoms. They may be lethargic or irritable. They may feel weak or unable to think straight. They may be combative, and they may start sweating. Hypoglycemia can come on suddenly without warning. Students can get tired or start feeling ill for any number of reasons.
Test your blood sugar.
No, I'm fine.
Are you sure?
If they're doing sports, They can sweat, but if they've got diabetes, you need to watch for any change in behavior or appearance. Hypoglycemia can be unpredictable. The student's condition can deteriorate very quickly. If not treated promptly, they may have a seizure, trouble swallowing, or they may faint. Be familiar with the student's low symptoms and treatment as contained in the Diabetes Medical Management Plan, and know where to find the student's low blood glucose supplies. Fruit juice, glucose tabs, or regular soda can deliver 15 grams of fast-acting carbohydrate. Your job is to intervene and treat before the student's condition worsens. And remember, a student experiencing hypoglycemia should never be left alone. Hypoglycemia can come on at any time, not just during sports. Sometimes the signs are not going to jump out at you. But again, if you've got a student with diabetes, keep an eye out for the red flags. Watch to see if she's sweating or feeling weak when she shouldn't be, if she loses interest or looks pale or sleepy. Clammy skin can be another sign. But the main thing to look for is the change in behavior. A minute ago, the student was focused and looked fine. Very suddenly, though, she's lost interest, and she looks just out of it.
You have your meter in your purse?
It's in my locker, but I'll be okay.
Stay right there. I'm going to get you some juice.
Hypoglycemia can sometimes affect the way people think. So don't expect the student to know what's happening, or even be cooperative. If you don't have a blood glucose meter, treat for hypoglycemia anyway. After a hypoglycemic event, kids need time to rest and recover. Severe hypoglycemia, low blood glucose, can be very serious. Hypoglycemia takes place when insulin and blood glucose are out of balance, and this can be caused by a number of factors. Too much insulin, not eating enough food, too much exercise, or eating late. The student may lose consciousness. She may have seizures. She may be unable to swallow. If that happens, never try to give the student food or drink or put anything in the mouth.
Jaren, go get some help.
A student experiencing hypoglycemia should never be left alone.
Call 911.
Someone else needs to call for help and call 911.
Hi, I have an emergency at my school. My friend has diabetes and she just passed out.
For cases of severe hypoglycemia, the school nurse or other trained staff need to know how to administer glucagon. Glucagon acts directly on the liver to release stored glucose. The glucagon kit needs to be where school staff can get to it. Position the student on her side and administer glucagon. The student should wake up in 10 to 20 minutes. She should drink fruit juice and a snack in accordance with the Diabetes Medical Management Plan. Check blood sugar levels every 10 to 15 minutes until emergency personnel arrive, and until the student's back to her target range, according to her Diabetes Medical Management Plan. Keep checking until emergency personnel arrive. Keep a close eye on the student. She may not even remember what happened. She may experience nausea, vomiting, or headache. That's okay. This is normal. Glucagon is a life-saving treatment that cannot harm the student.
Something that I felt was a good experience with some of my teachers is that they made sure to keep juice and crackers for me if I had a low. That's something that showed that they cared. Also, if we were on a field trip or in a class, they would pull me to the side and ask me if I was doing okay. Even though they didn't know too much about my disease, they still showed that they cared and made sure that I was doing all right.
Because people with diabetes don't have enough insulin, their bodies can't move glucose from the blood into the other cells. The glucose builds up in the bloodstream. High blood glucose above target range is called hyperglycemia. To help you remember, think hyper, think high. Any number of things can cause hyperglycemia. It's possible that the student has forgotten to take insulin or hasn't taken enough. The student may have eaten more than planned. Food raises blood glucose levels. Stress, inactivity, or illness can also cause hyperglycemia. Among the signs are thirst, tiredness, dry skin, and stomach pains. Also fatigue, the inability to concentrate, and frequent urination are signs of hyperglycemia. Whatever the cause, you need to know how to recognize hyperglycemia. This is important.
Hang on a sec.
While hyperglycemia should be avoided and treated in all students according to the Diabetes Medical Management Plan, which may include giving insulin, it is important to know that the onset of hyperglycemia comes on more quickly in students who experience insulin pump malfunctions. You're not expected to be a doctor, but when you have a student with diabetes and you notice that something's wrong, you've got to take action.
Probably one of the worst experiences in school for me was when my teacher complained to my mom that I went to the bathroom too much during her class. What she didn't understand is that I had hives often during that time because that class was after lunch. My mom tried to explain that to her, but I think she thought I just didn't like the class.
Diabetes care balances three things: insulin or other medications, food or carbohydrate intake, and physical activity. The student's meal plan is central to maintaining this balance. The child's healthcare team and parent create an individualized meal plan based upon carbohydrate counting. Protein and fat may be taken into consideration, and younger students may need help to make food choices. There are no forbidden foods for students with diabetes. It's the carbs that count. However, all children should have access to healthy meals and snacks at school. So it's important for families to have accurate carbohydrate information in advance. The amount of insulin must be matched with the amount of carbohydrates. With some insulin regimens, snacks and meals must be timed consistently. A missed snack or meal can mean hypoglycemia, low blood glucose, and that can be very serious. Plan in advance for special activities, such as parties, field trips, and extracurricular activities. Snacks have to be planned out too. If you're off school grounds, make sure that you bring snacks, diabetes equipment and supplies, glucagon, and a list of emergency contacts. Physical activity is good for all kids, but students with diabetes may need to adjust their insulin and food intake to the intensity of physical exercise they get. Typically, physical activity lowers blood glucose. That's why fast-acting carbs like fruit juice, regular soda, or glucose tablets should always be on hand. Make sure that the student also has access to a snack, meter, and diabetes supplies before, during, and after exercise. Sometimes exercise may have to wait. Follow the Diabetes Medical Management Plan.
Another bad experience in school was when my principal walked up to me in the lunch line and asked if I was feeling okay. Not that that was something very humiliating to say, but I just didn't want to be in the spotlight, and as a type 1 diabetic, I don't think we want attention drawn to us because of our diabetes.
And thank you, Mr. Smith, for joining us. As you all know, we're going to go over his child's 504 plan. As you all know, the Americans with
Disabilities Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act all provide protections to people with disabilities, including children with diabetes. These federal laws ensure equal access to school-sponsored activities. Students may not be shut out of any school activity because of their diabetes, and they are entitled to a medically safe environment. Which laws apply depend upon both the type of school the student goes to and how diabetes affects him or her. State laws also need to be taken into consideration in determining, for example, who does what task, but the bottom line is that students must get the services they are entitled to at school, and parents cannot be required to come to school to provide care. Once a student has been diagnosed with diabetes and found to be protected by one or more of these laws, school staff and family need to take the next step and write a 504 plan, or an Individualized Education Program, or IEP. That explains how the student's diabetes medical management plan will be implemented in the school setting. This plan gives all the details of how the student's diabetes will be managed in the school setting. The school, the student, and the parents all need to be on the same page. They need to know where and when the student should check blood glucose, and whether the student needs help in doing so. Who at the school is trained in diabetes management. That includes the school nurse and other school staff who give care if a nurse is not available. Where diabetes supplies are kept. The student should have free access to water and restrooms. The student's nutritional needs for meals, snacks, and special events like parties, and how food is going to be handled. The student has a right to alternate times for exams if he or she is experiencing low or high blood glucose. The student should not be penalized for absences for doctor's appointments or prolonged illness. The student with diabetes should be safe on field trips and all school-sponsored events. Wherever the student is, diabetes supplies and trained staff need to be there too.
Thank you for taking time to learn more about diabetes and listening to our experiences. As you've heard, teachers can make a big impact on the student with diabetes, for better or for worse.
Remember to keep the lines of communication open. Talk to students and parents often and address any issues or concerns you have related to their diabetes. We hope you'll continue to look for opportunities to learn more about diabetes and advocate for these students.
Just as I was happy to have supportive teachers, they will be glad to have your support at school.